Welcome to the Bladtcast. As always, I am Christian Bladt for a little Halloween themed Bladtcast. I'm excited to be joined by our guest, Carlos Danger. Carlos, thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, a few months back, I had Tukey on the show, and
Ugh.
I don't know if you understand the background on this, but Tukey, America's favorite wannabe Muppet. He's really caught on. I'm glad I got him when I did.
When you say
Uh,
favorite, do you mean like most racist? I think you're trying to say.
well, favorite unless you're Italian,
Yeah. Okay.
So I
All
think
right.
I
I
think
just
that's
wanted to
that's
clarify.
kind of where it goes. And we had him on because I thought it would be fun to get him to come on and talk about the movie Oppenheimer because it would be super serious and let's like have a puppet on that hadn't seen it. And he and his pal El Horrible confessed that they don't really know a lot about movies, but you would be the person to talk to. So I reached out to you, and I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Tukey and El Horrible, but not that bastard Cardiff Electric. He can go jumping on the
Yeah,
moon.
interestingly, this is the first time I'm doing a show with you, except in a technical way, I was a guest on last week's remember the 90s,
Let me
which
guess.
was
They
about
called me
horror
fat.
movies.
Did they call me fat? Break it to me easy.
It did come up that you were
Yeah.
fat, and look, it's very easy for Cardiff to call people fat when you're a potato, when you're a starch,
Right.
but
Yeah.
and Cardiff had put some clip together that was like all jumbled up, you saying nonsense, and but I think it was a fun conversation because we got to talk about I got to talk about Silence of the Lambs, and
Oh, there you go.
I rewatched it for the first time in a very long time. I think I rewatched everything when the Hannibal series was on, so I'd seen it within the last decade, but it's still been a while. So it was fun to do that, and Cardiff brought Blair Witch Project, and Obnoxious John brought Scream. So I thought it was a good cross section of 90s horror. And we're here today. We're going to talk about horror. We're going to talk about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And as I keep explaining to people, oh, you're going to talk about the 1974 Tobe Hooper classic. No, 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 no. We're going to talk about the 2022 Netflix Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's about influencers or celebrity chefs or some shit like that. That I even after seeing it, I'm not entirely sure.
The
But
movie wasn't sure either.
yeah, the movie had a little bit of an identity crisis. The movie would have liked to have also put a mask of human flesh over it so that it couldn't see itself. But I wanted to take a moment and just sort of explain, as much as you want to say about who you are, but also what you do as an insufferable bastard as you are, just to let our audience know a little bit about you.
Yeah, so we're a YouTube page, Insufferable Bastards. It's myself, Brian Spears, and OJ, the guy Obnoxious John you
Yeah.
just mentioned. And we're essentially a YouTube channel that's out of ideas. We launched in 2016 as an audio only podcast, failed miserably. It was under another name. It was myself, the guy Brian, who's a special effects makeup artist. He works on
Oh,
all
cool.
types of movies and TV. He's based in New York City. And this third guy was this dude, Joe Greenberg, who was a screenwriter. And he actually sold a script after we launched the podcast, and it got named to the blacklist. And he sold it to a major studio.
Right. And just for our audience who might not be so savvy on that, I've known people who've ended up on the blacklist, and it's a very cool thing where it's literally this list, but it's not a blacklist in a negative sense. This isn't like the Red Scare. This is like, these are really great scripts. Somebody should read this and make it, try to get attention. And some of that stuff, I can't think of a good example, but there's stuff that goes on to be hugely successful that if it hadn't been on the blacklist, people might have never read it. So your former co-host had something on the blacklist.
Right. It's he got paid for it. It hasn't been produced, which is a way with a lot of those. But my
Sure.
experience with it, he then left the podcast. He was just
Oh.
see you guys, and that was the end of him. So
Oh.
we were talking about
So
horror movies, of course.
it's a little bit of an inside baseball from the WATP verse. So he crozed you, is what you're trying to say.
That's right. Yes, he was gone the first chance he had. So we would talk about horror movies in the beginning with him, and I'm during the day I'm a news reporter. I'm a local news reporter, like hyper local. Think your local rag, but mine's online and it's sponsored by a nonprofit. So that was the three, and then we me and Brian, we changed our name and we just talked about movies in general and television in general. We did that for a while. We got kind of sick of that, but we've always been Howard Stern fans, the two of us, our whole lives.
Sure.
We're both from the New York City area.
Yeah,
And
I grew up in Orange County, New York, so like 45 miles
okay.
northwest of the
I'm from
city.
Westchester. Northern Westchester is
Right.
where I was
Yeah.
born.
So and where I grew up, it's right where the suburbs start to get rural. Like the next town over had cow pastures and cornfields.
You
But
guys
my
were all good
town,
at soccer. Yeah.
yeah, but but my school was so small we didn't have a football team. My
Oh, wow.
my high school was two towns put together, and my graduating class was 63 people.
Can I ask
So
what high school it was? Or is
yeah,
that
it's
too,
Tuxedo High School. It's on Route
like,
17, and
okay.
but I'm from Greenwood Lake, which sometimes people know as a resort town, which it was in the 60s. And it'll like they went there in The Sopranos. I think they mentioned it in Mean Streets. But what happened as New York went off the cliff a little bit in the 70s and into the early 80s, people started moving to where I lived. So that's
The dirty New
sort of
Yorkers, you mean? Yeah.
yeah, well,
So my parents, yeah.
it would be the really tough kids who would move into our school, but it's like if you were that tough, your parents wouldn't have had to, flee the city so that you stopped getting your ass kicked every day. You know, we have a couple people in the chat. One of them seems to be a fan. This is Flat Cat Jessica. Just gives a shout out to Carlos. But Kinky Loco, and look, on the one hand, I'm honored because I've never had Kinky Loco in one of my chats, at least not on my channel.
Ban him.
But Kinky Loco, it's very rude to just shout out boo right away.
I would ban him immediately and save yourself some trouble.
But Kinky Loco says, fun fact, Carlos and I are from the same town, but he is much older and larger. Kinky Loco, come on. I mean, he's our guest. The least we can do is show him some respect. But yeah, so I mentioned sort of where I'm from because of I don't know, like at a certain point everybody was a Howard fan, and I went to college in Poughkeepsie, and the signal for K-Rock didn't reach up there. So it was the early days of the internet. I found a station out of Florida that streamed, so I could still hear it. But I think a few years earlier I just would have been out of luck. And yeah, so that's sort of how our paths cross at all, because any of our common friends and associates and potatoes are associated with what is known as the Dabbleverse, which I've tried to explain before in the show, but it's essentially people goofing on stuttering John Melendez. That's the greatest way to summarize it.
That's definitely the origin, and now it's expanded. It's now like there's a hackverse sort of things that are related to Kevin Brennan, that whole world.
Yeah.
And about a year ago, we fell into that. Me specifically, I got lost in the Dabbleverse. I loved it. Discovering Cardiff Electric, I thought he was hilarious. I had already listened to WATP. There was an episode, the one where he bashes Patton Oswalt's podcast, where Carl brought us up as idiot losers who are doing a terrible podcast. So I got that on my resume. But yeah, the last week we've tried, or last year, we started to do this Hackverse week in review, essentially. Me, now OJ, Obnoxious John, who's joined about, 7 months ago. And we would do just a wrap up of all the drama and hatred and the insanity going on. I've been on Ray DeVito's podcast like 60, 70 times. That is another thing on my resume.
Yeah, I don't think Ray DeVito likes me because I had
you were awful to him. Yeah, no, don't think I don't know.
Yeah. I had an appearance on Who Are These Podcasts, because all I did is I reached out to Carl. I'm like, hey, Ray DeVito was on Jim and Sam's show. I think you should listen to it. He's like, all right, I hope to get a chance to it. And then all I did is I wrote to him, was like, I clipped it for you. And I figured he would just play it. And he's like, why don't you come on? I'm like, all right. But I've gotten to know Liam McEnany lives out here, and he was on our
another
anniversary show for the 30th anniversary of the Chevy Chase show, and he knows Ray as the kids say, IRL, in real life, and he has also shown up on Who Are These Podcasts talking about Ray, trying to be a good friend. But yeah, so I always say that, like, wow, Ray DeVito's like the nicest guy on the internet. But he's also everybody's punching bag, except for some reason,
Yeah, he's Ray. He's maliciously stupid. He's gotten me angry at times, but at the end of the day, he's a good guy. I mean, I was watching Patrick Melton of Nobody Likes Onions yesterday, and he was fantasizing about killing Ray, and then the whole chat was thinking of ways they would kill Ray.
Oh no. I
I
don't
don't
want
I don't
that.
really yeah, I don't
Look,
really
to
feel
to
the need. I
to
don't want to kill him. I've never
to
felt the
bring
urge to
it
kill Ray
back
DeVito.
to Silence of the Lambs, Dr. Lecter at the end of the film, he calls Agent Starling as she graduates and becomes a full-fledged agent, and he says the world is more interesting with you in it. So that she's like, don't be scared. I'm not going to come find you. And the world is more interesting with Ray DeVito in it. I feel that very strongly. I
That's
also feel like the
very well
world
said.
is more interesting with John Melendez in it. This iteration of him. This is, what are people going to have to talk about? Your co-host Brian Spears is in the chat. Shot a movie in Greenwood Lake. I wonder if there was a movie with Morgan
He does
Freeman
Glass
in
Eye
it.
Picks. Larry Fessenden
Okay.
is his like a New York City independent guy.
Okay.
Brian, what movie? Well, why would you not name the movie for God's
Well,
sakes?
no, what I was going to say is
why
like
he's
I
a
didn't know if
problem.
I don't know if he worked on the Morgan Freeman movie that I don't remember the name of it. And Trampoletic Converters. Had to look at that. I had to look at that icon before I put it on the. Tampalytics. Yeah. I don't have my glasses
that's
on.
Stevie Lou, who is that is offensive to a lot of people.
Yeah. Why does Carlos have the lights on?
It's true. I'm not wearing a hat. I shaved because you're legitimate. You're not like these Dabbleverse scum that I'm usually with.
Well, I'm a different breed of scum.
Okay.
As they say on the Simpsons, scum compared to Krusty. That's the level of scum that I am. But Flat Cat Jessica says, fun fact: Carlos and I went to our senior prom together. Is that true, or is that just?
I'd rather not dox myself.
Rather not say. That's interesting. All right. My senior prom was held at West Point, the military academy, in like a ballroom there. And I don't know. I guess I hope the soldiers weren't just lingering around outside. The cadets, excuse me. Anyway,
Texas Chainsaw Massacre hit home for you, I guess. That whole setting, right? Because once you get past Westchester County, New York becomes a wasteland of failed industry, former yeshivas, right?
Yeah, well, there's a very large Hasidic Jewish community called Curious Joel that is like 2 towns over from me, and they would be, you'd see them wherever you went, and just at some point as a kid, it had to be explained to me. I was like, why do they have on funny hats or that sort of a thing? I didn't know. So it's funny because like my school had like one Jewish family in it, but then like 2 towns over, there's like thousands of Orthodox Jews that are have their their own community really, but it's not like we wouldn't see them. So the reason that I'm glad you talked about the sort of more redneck quality to where I'm from, there was an incident that reminded me of it could very well have been this situation. So we were in 8th grade, and this was 1990. We went to, and this is all relevant to the movie, believe it or not. So with a couple of my friends, my one friend's uncle had a pickup truck. So we rode in the back to the pickup truck. We drove from Greenwood Lake to beautiful Middletown, New York, where at the county fair, Kiss were playing. This is the non-makeup Kiss on the Hot in the Shade tour. And tickets were, I believe, $16, but we were very excited. But on the drive, and I think we took like some back roads.
It wasn't Midget
highway.
Kiss. I don't mean to interrupt, but $16 for 80s. It wasn't the midget guys.
No, this is the actual Kiss. I mean, if you think about it, like even like big concerts in New York City at that point probably cost like $25-$30. So this is like, this is a county fair, standing room only, that sort of a thing. So we're driving like on sort of like a rural back road, I think, because of the fact that we're in the pickup truck and in the back and not strapped in, and in a way that is very much unsafe, that I don't think my mom understood how we were getting there. So surprise, Mom, 32 years later. And there was something wrong at one point, and I don't know, they needed like a bolt to make sure that the tire didn't fall off. So we pulled over at a house on a side road, and my friend Dan and I, my friend Ron, we immediately think like, that that looks like the house from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And legitimately, it was like a big house, isolated, sort of on some farmland, that sort of a thing. And the guy who comes out might as well, I'm talking about the original movie, might as well have been the guy at the gas station, you know?
Hmm.
And he was asking us all questions, in a very suspicious, untrusting way, because clearly, whether he was a cannibal with his own, slaughterhouse in the living room, there was something that he was hiding for sure. So he asked me a question. I didn't hear him. I said, "What?" He asked it again. I said, "What?" And I this still gets referenced from time to time by my friend Dan. The guy's like, "You say what one more time, I'm going to jump up there and bite your goddamn ears off." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. I think he might." Like legitimately. And look, I was with like three adults, but that didn't mean that I felt particularly safe. It all ended up all right, probably because the police pulled up to see why we were on the side of the road and if we needed any help or anything. And
That man
but
was Carl Hamburger.
yeah, I'm sorry. Did I leave that out? That was how I met Carl
Yeah.
for the first time.
Right.
Yeah.
That town still nicer than Rochester.
I went to Rochester
Dumped.
back in June, and it is lovely that time of year,
I
Carlos.
I was in the I went to DabbleCon in February. I mean, there was one bodega where they had I got my beer at a place where there were wild animals, like not just rats,
Yeah,
but birds.
that sounds about right.
But other than that, it was nice.
Yeah. For our visual audience, I have a background behind me, which is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre house, but I've also gone full screen with that image so that I can help paint the picture after I'm done telling the story. But so you're not entirely wrong. There's a lot of farmland. There's some rural areas that I grew up in. I think that I don't know. This is the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre serves a lot of purposes. There's a lot of lessons to be learned. Don't pick up hitchhikers, don't hitchhike, uh, you know, don't walk into a big empty house for any reason, really, ever. I mean, nothing good's going to happen by doing that. I don't know. I mean, how old were you the first time you saw the original, Carlos?
Well, I was a little older actually.
Yeah.
I think I saw part 2 prior to seeing part 1. I think I saw like Evil Dead 2 before I saw the
Right.
original Texas
One
Chainsaw
part two is
Massacre
the one with Dennis Hopper, the great Dennis
with
Hopper, might I
with
say. Yeah.
Dennis Hopper. Yes, yes. Bill Moseley actually steals the movie. So I had seen American Werewolf in London and the first Evil
Mhm.
Dead. So by the time I got around to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I was probably in ninth grade. And to be
Okay.
honest with you, after seeing all that, I was disappointed.
Yeah.
I mean, I respect what it is in terms of movie history, particularly horror. I think that and Last House on the Left are still tough to sit through to this day. But I wasn't
Yeah.
a huge. A lot of horror fans are like, this is their Bible. It starts and it ends with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I respect it as a movie, but I prefer part 2.
Right, and I thought that was one of the interesting things that you said, and, rewatching, part 1, you're kind of reminded that you have to watch it imagining you're in the bubble of, walking into a theater in 1974 where you've never seen anything like that, and I thought it was interesting. It's like, for all the stuff that's in it, there's like, when the first girls, like, put up on the meat hook, they don't actually show it, and I'm like, "Oh, that's a really
Right.
interesting choice." So, it's a little bit more tame than stuff that came after it, but at the same time, I was talking about earlier about how we discussed Blair Witch Project. And I do remember the first time I saw that in the theater, like that was the most audible, like surprised people were. So I can imagine a 1974 audience, that first time that you see Leatherface kind of poke his head out of the kitchen, that's probably has to be like a what the, like what the fuck is that?
And it just
So
gets under your skin. It's a movie that
yeah,
makes your skin crawl. It's uncomfortable.
right, and just like the dinner scene with Grandpa, the
Hmm.
reveal that Grandpa's not dead, which you just figured he would be a corpse, is like, oh, he'd be better off if he was. So yeah, I think that it has to be definitely more so than, and I feel like Toby Hooper made the second one. I think he was like, all right, I have a little bit of money. I mean, I think that the original was made for like $80,000. I think I read, And I mean, yeah, that's what, $1973, but still, that's very inexpensive, and it kind of shows at times. So it's almost more like a museum piece, the original, I think. The only one that I ever saw in the theater, because while this Netflix one had a limited theatrical run, Carlos, I think most people didn't see it that way, and I know I didn't.
Right.
So,
Same.
but the only one that I did see in the theater was the Jessica Biel,
Jessica
starring.
Biel.
Yeah, Jessica Biel starring in
Me too.
the 2003 remake, and I'm sure that her husband Justin Timberlake doesn't have any problem with her being in this movie, considering that he forced Britney Spears to have a massacre of her own when she was 19, allegedly. But
Hey
I was
now.
thinking about, like, yeah, thank you. I was pretty proud of that. But I was thinking about how I was like, oh yeah, I kind of remember liking that movie. Why did I like that movie? And then I just looked for posters and images of it, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember now why I liked it. The, the
That
girl from Seventh Heaven in a way too tight
right.
see-through white wife beater.
Her breasts are listed separately in the credits. They were a character in that film.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's the way, and it's not, we're not being, I mean, yeah, we're being perverted old men, but that's the way
but
it's framed. That's the way it's
yeah,
photographed.
yeah,
That's
they
where your
definitely
eyes are
had their own
supposed to go in
trailer
that
on
film.
set, Carlos. They definitely had their own trailer on set. And yeah, I mean, I remember once in an interview, Jennifer Love Hewitt talking about the poster for I Know What You Did Last Summer. It was like when it came out. She's like, yeah, I know what your breasts did last summer. I'm like, well, yes, clearly we understand, but I remember liking that one. But most of them, like, I saw on VHS. I rented them from the video store, there's a couple, I guess, a couple after the reboot. There was like a prequel one that I never saw. There was like a 3D one that I didn't even know about. So it had been a little while since I had visited with this franchise. By the way, in the chat, my pal Dominicus Saxon seemed to like my jokes. So you know what, Dominicus Saxon, sometimes I feel like I'm just doing the show for you.
Is it the joke or is it for the breasts?
Oh, you
The
know
standing
what?
ovation.
Yeah,
Sorry, I don't
it's
mean to
got
take away your.
no, you're
I'll shut up.
100% right. And knowing Dominicus Saxon, I think that's fair. But he does weigh in that the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre was well done, but like all slasher flicks, they lose fast for me. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that like at the peak, like Friday the 13th, there were so many kills in them. You had like Jason like throwing a girl in a sleeping bag against a tree, and that like doesn't even count, because you don't actually see it. I think that the death count was a little low. Even in the original Halloween, you only see so many. By the 80s,
Right.
it was like, we got 90 minutes. How many kids do you think we can kill?
They were money shots. It was the pornography or the horror equivalent of a money shot in pornography.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The only
By
reason
the
you
way,
saw
in
slasher
the
movies.
chat is Eugene, who is a good boy. Everybody knows Eugene's a good boy, and it just says tits. But ironically,
Exactly.
I'm covering them up with your comment, Eugene. So,
but one thing, and we'll get into it, I guess, later. But I mean, one difference between this brand new movie and say the remake with Jessica Biel and part 2, and even part 1, they're perverted. There is this juxtaposition of breasts, and I mean, the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre is one of the most famous shots of the movie is a woman's ass, and then that house of horrors looming in the distance, right? So you have those two things happening. Same thing with part 2. Leatherface literally uses his chainsaw as a penis at one point to sort of sexually assault the final girl. You have that happening, and then this movie, I mean, it's a little more subtle, but yeah, her breasts are a character in the movie. This new one is asexual. It's the Ray DeVito of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's no type of sex happening in this movie.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to hit the Cardiff Electric Memorial Bell for that one. So yes, you've found yourself on a
Cardiff's
show where
dead?
there's a bell. It's an honor. We're getting ready.
Oh.
Let's just put it that way. But Stuttering John Live, March 10th is what he would say if I asked him if he's feeling okay. It's all focused on that. But yeah, the new one, it's so hard to describe what the attempt was. And I was telling you before we started, I read up on it a little bit, and the original director was fired after a week of filming. And I don't know a lot of movies that turn out in a way where everybody's happy after the director is fired at that point.
They were in
Sort of
Bulgaria.
big, yeah, sort of big budget of that happened recently for nerds was the Han Solo's movie that came out. That Lord and Miller from the Lego Movie directed a movie, and then they're like, no, we need Ron Howard to make a
Ron
Disney kind of
Howard.
movie, and it's like he's the guy. He's
We
the
got to make
guy
this
that
as white as possible.
right, exactly.
Get
So
Opie.
so yeah, and it's just like, all right, was there an original vision? They didn't use any of the footage that the original director shot, and I don't know. I assume you were aware of that happened from the
I was,
beginning, right?
yeah. One thing that struck me about that was they were two. It was a brother team. It was two of them that got fired. I don't know what they're like, Irish guys.
Ryan and Andy Tohill was their name. Yeah,
Now, the reason we know they got fired is because it was everywhere. So it's like
yeah,
this is a film that was partly financed by Legendary Pictures, right? I guess Netflix either distributed or whatever. But they put out a press
yeah,
release. Obviously, they didn't keep it a secret that we fired those two Irishmen, and it was everywhere. Like they just smeared these guys. I don't understand the motivation for that. It's not like people were clamoring for this. This isn't a Star Wars movie where there's a fandom invested in who's doing what. So
right.
I thought that says something possibly about Legendary Pictures, that they're really a bunch of douchebags. And that studio was partly funded. It was created by a hedge fund. So we're talking about
Right.
soulless art here.
Well, the interesting thing too is that they, as you alluded to, they were filming in Bulgaria. I think if you don't do a press release where you talk about how you fired the director, nobody's going to find out, at least not for a
Right.
while, you know? And
There's no horror
obviously,
journalists anymore. There's no entertainment journalism really. That's not like spoon fed from studios.
yeah, no,
Right.
yeah, exactly. You're not an actual reporter. You're just somebody who conveys press releases. As someone who gets a lot of press releases, I I can definitely attest to that. And I guess it was they were originally going to start filming in May of 2020, and then as I was reading that, I'm like, okay, so COVID delayed them, but they filmed in August of 2020, so they didn't wait that long,
They
And
didn't
they're
do
like,
it.
it's Bulgaria, we're outside, it's fine.
Right.
I'd like to talk to the COVID compliance officer on the set in Bulgaria for Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Right.
I knew people who had that job for big studio Disney productions, and it's pretty hardcore, like what you have to do, and everybody resents you, but you're like, well, that's what I'm getting paid for. I can imagine there's just somebody with a clipboard that as everybody walks into the set in Bulgaria, like, anybody got a cough? Fever? All right, go ahead. It's fine.
Like a former mercenary, or the guy's probably armed to the teeth.
Yeah.
He's got a
And
knife. What are some other Bulgarian stereotypes I can talk about?
Yeah, well, that you can talk about. Yeah. You don't want to get this flagged for hate crimes against Bulgarians.
True, I saw it happen.
Not again. I can't get another anti-Bulgarian strike on my channel, Carlos. I don't want that. So had you, before we started talking about this, I assume you had already seen this before we decided that we were going to do this as our
our Christian,
show?
I've now seen this movie twice thanks to you.
I love that you've seen it twice. I've seen it the one time, and I'm probably good, but I mean, I don't want to speak before. I don't want to count my chickens before they've been sawed in half with a chainsaw. And our visual audience will see the trailer, because I've found that you can usually get away with showing movie trailers, but not actual scenes from movies. So you saw it when it came out, or like, had you already, let's put it this way, when you saw it, had you heard that in general people weren't happy with the way it turned out?
I don't remember. I honestly don't remember. I think I knew there was some trouble in the production, but I wasn't. Netflix, you just turn it on and suddenly there's like a new Robert De Niro movie on, or Scorsese has something out that you don't even know about.
True.
So I think it just kind of, I turned on the TV and there it was.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's like, oh, look, Chappelle's fourth special this year. That's great, but it's very hard. Netflix is definitely, out of all the streamers, it's the one that somebody will be like, oh, hey, I watched this great show on Netflix, and they'll talk all about it. Like, I've never even heard of that, and like some of the
Right.
quality is very high. This is not that case though. The Texas Chainsaw. So how would you describe the concept behind this? I'm half joking when I said, well, it's a bunch of influencers or celebrity chefs or some shit, but I also didn't quite get it. You've seen it twice. So do you think that
Yeah.
you have a better understanding of who these kids are, basically, that
I
head into Harlow, Texas?
I mean, again, I'm going to keep going back to this. If to me, this is AI art. If you make something online and it's artificial intelligence, it sort of looks like something, but there's
Yeah,
something missing, right? And this whole movie feels like that, especially the script and these characters. Because you're right, in the marketing material, it says it's these group of influencers who go to this
yeah,
town. And then early in the movie, they talk about how the gas station attendant, they're going to gentrify this small little Texas town. But these are not influencers. These are real estate investors. They're young, but yeah, they're two chefs who apparently went to culinary school and started successful businesses and now have this economic development plan to help this abandoned town. It's not, they're neither influencers and it's not gentrification. So the movie thinks it's presenting characters in this way, but it just isn't. Gentrification is when there's people existing in a community. Maybe they were raised there, and all these trust fund kids. You know what happened to Williamsburg, Brooklyn. All
sure, yeah.
the hipsters come over from Greenwich Village, and it's too expensive there in Manhattan, so they take over.
But
And
but
with their
Carlos,
trust
there's an
fund,
arcade that serves beer now, so that seems like
right?
it was probably worth it, right?
But this town, there was 5 residents of this small Texas town. It's dead, right? There are
Yeah,
5 residents, one of whom dies within the first 5 minutes of the movie. One of whom is
yeah.
Leatherface. This town would love these idiots coming in and buying up their land. I mean, it didn't. The premise of the movie makes no sense. And also, it's when we watch a movie like this obviously isn't the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's not going to
No.
be that good. We just want to see young teens die in horrible ways, right? That's
Yeah.
essentially what this movie promises. And instead of, you could make these characters so hateable if they actually made them influencers. We all just watched a video where a YouTube prankster is in a mall harassing a guy he works for like Uber Eats or something like
Yeah.
that. Guy takes out a gun, a pistol, shoots the kid point blank in his gut. We all cheered for the gunman in that situation.
Even we covered that on Who Are These Broadcasters, and even the judge saw the video and was like, "Well, yeah, what did you expect?
I'm
You were
sick of
being
these.
a
You're an
dick."
asshole. We're sick of this.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Look,
And you'd
to be
think like
fair, to be fair, they're both assholes, but the one asshole was provoked by a bigger asshole who felt like he needed to act.
and I'm not advocating shooting anybody in the
No,
gut, right? But
absolutely.
we all feel it. We all want to do that, and that's what this movie fails to capture. These should be hateable characters instead, or at least a mix, right? A mix. You have one who's not as hateable, but there's no Jake Paul in there. There's no Kardashians in this. There's no
By the way,
you want to
I
see
wish
these
there was a
people,
Jake Paul in this. That would have been
something.
perfect.
They're all just
Yeah.
bland real estate investors. They're like good business people who happen to be very young, and somehow
Yeah.
the movie calls them influencers. So
Right, and I think
it
that's more.
it derails the whole movie.
It's more of like a catch-all, and you feel like that's somebody, whether it's Netflix, Legendary Pictures, somebody bought the pitch for this version because they're like, oh, this will be with influencers. Like, okay, now we're talking. And yeah, the one character that I think we're supposed to identify with and have the most sympathy for, her name is Lila. She's played by Elsie Fisher, who was in the Bo Burnham movie Eighth Grade, probably some other things, but they give her an interesting backstory. So like they have tools to work with that can make this interesting. So she survived a school shooting. So the idea that she's been through that trauma prior to this, and she lived through it, and there's a flashback to it. I'm like, all right, they're going to do something interesting with that. We're going to spoil the whole movie for everybody, by the way.
Oh yeah,
Carlos, do you think that they set themselves up for success with that backstory? And do you think that they fully realized the fact that this girl had been in a school shooting?
Listen, if you're gonna make a movie that that tries to play on the audience sympathy by making one of your characters the survivor of a school shooting. Like, you better be a goddamn good movie. To
Yeah.
me, this comes across as just incredibly exploitive. I don't want to say offensive, but man, they are digging deep. Oh yeah, one of them survived a school shooting, and then the way they have, she's watching Leatherface massacre people, and she suddenly has a flashback. But I don't know what was the point of making her the survivor of a school shooting. There's like, this movie has so many issues, it just sort of throws in there for no reason. We get culture war stuff, we get Second Amendment stuff, we get a Confederate flag thrown in there for no reason. Then there's PTSD thrown in there, how to deal with trauma, but it never goes anywhere. They just throw these things out there, and I found that to be useless. You could have taken, I get what you're saying. Yeah, there's some semblance of an interesting backstory there, but
there's
all
a
they did was give her a nice
yeah.
scar. There's a potential for
right,
it. Yeah,
exactly.
I'll give you that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. There was potential, and I'm like, okay, they'll do something with this. And apart from the interaction with the guy who has the assault rifle in his auto body, by the way, because he lives in Texas, which that was the point of that.
Getting a lot of business there, I'm sure, in a dead town. Like what?
Yeah, that's the resident, the population 5. And then it's confusing because he's got it's a cool reveal that the original chainsaw, I mean, at least that model from the original movie, is just hidden in the wall so that he can get back to doing what he loves best. So it's not some fancier, newer, I don't know, the new chainsaws that you can hack up 14s at a time. I don't even know how it works. I don't know how they market them, but and then you start to think, I'm like, so this can't be the same Leatherface from 50 years ago. He doesn't look like it. And, the mom isn't one of the characters in the original. And I'm like, I shouldn't be overthinking this, but they're telling a story that has enough holes in it. And it's also not compelling at all. So I had a lot of time to think about, like, I don't quite get who this Leatherface is, and at the very end, he goes back to the house during the credits. There's an end credit scenes. It's like a Marvel movie. And
thanks, Marvel.
And yeah, I know, exactly. Thanks for making everybody have to read who the key grips and the gaffers were. And and you're like, okay, so what's he gonna do there? Did he used to live in that house? Because I don't think he's old enough. Because we have why
did he go back 50 years ago? I don't know.
Right. No, and we have as a character in the movie, we have Sally from the original, not played by the same actress, Marilyn Burns. She passed away in 2014. So I don't know whether or not, she would have wanted to, but so you can't fault them for not having the original actress. So you have Sally sort of, oh yeah, she's been a Texas Ranger for 50 years and she hasn't been able to find him. I'm like, really? Like, you could find that house again. You drive away from that house in a pickup truck. It's not like, they dumped you in a ditch and you woke up and you had no idea where you were. You could trace your steps. And I think in some of the other movies, they deal with the fact that, I guess, the townspeople basically, like, killed the other family members. They were so outraged what was going on. And I don't know, but I think that I don't know. I guess I'm overthinking it, aren't I, Carlos?
Well,
trying to reconcile the two timelines.
I don't think you are. I think it's a problem with the script. It's just sloppy plotting the entire way through. Because I also I nitpicked the opening scene. The opening scene of the movie. We've got Lila in a roadside gas station and she's watching a DVD. The movie makes it a point to tell us she's watching a DVD to sort of make itself relevant and cool and hip, I guess. I don't know. And she's watching a true crime documentary narrated by John Larroquette, who also did the narration.
I'm glad you mentioned that. As soon as I heard his voice, I'm like, all right. And he also narrated the 2003 remake. So
yes, allegedly in the very first film, he was paid in weed. They say that's
true. I've heard that, which is weird because that's how he was paid for season 4 of Night Court, not the previous season, but that was the one. He's like, I got to get paid in weed this year. Anyway, so she's watching this like true crime show.
And it says, like, because we're watching it too, because I guess, the younger people have never seen any of this. They need to establish some type of where we are and what's going to happen. And in the documentary, they're like, well, Sally got away And then she talked to the police and she never told her story again. She never spoke on the subject again. It's become
Right.
like a Texas urban legend to some extent. I'm implying that. No less than 50 seconds later, Lila walks over to pay for whatever crap she has. She's at the cashier. There's a newspaper article behind the cashier, and it's dated 1 month. It says in an opening paragraph, it's dated 1 month after the event of 1974, and it's a full interview with what's her name, Sally. So she gave an exclusive. Like, there's just things like, and that's really splitting hairs. But my point is, like, the whole movie's like that. The characters are contradictions. There's a mistake. I mean, that's a mistake within the first 2 minutes of this movie, and yeah, it makes me think, like, was this just AI? Was there actually no screenwriter and no director, and they just threw this? Was this just Cardiff Electric somehow? Like, he manipulates me every week on Who Are These 90s? It's just, none of it makes any sense. So that bothered me. So I don't think you're crazy. There's no other way. This movie it bores into your brain with its stupidity.
Yeah. I do think if this had been a Cardiff Electric joint, the soundtrack would have at least been better. You know,
a lot of Motley Crue and 80s hair bands. You mean?
Right, well, you know, he and I have that in common, and hopefully Cardiff and I have an announcement for a special we'll be doing sometime soon. But the I's aren't dotted and the T's aren't crossed. But I was basically thinking, like, you know, Nirvana's Negative Creep would have shown up in one of the massacre sequences if Cardiff had made this movie. But I'm sorry, finish your thought. That's non-potato.
Well, did you know? I'm all over the place. But again, in that opening scene, so we have that happen inside, and then we go outside. We meet Richter. Right, Richter's the mechanic. He comes pulling up. He's got a pickup truck that's blowing off exhaust. There's no muffler on it, right? And he's wearing a gun, which is they take great offense. One character takes great offense to the fact he's wearing a gun, but Richter pulls up blasting. I thought it was death metal, but I went and looked, and it's some band called Cybreed. Should I know these guys? I
don't know them.
An industrial metal band from Switzerland. It's an industrial metal band.
I'm going to do a name drop right now. I'll ask my pal Don Jameson if he knows them, because if anybody knows any kind of death metal from anywhere in Europe, it's Don. So I will ask him for sure.
A follow-up is this big in like rural dead towns in Texas? Like, that's what this guy's going to be listening to? It made no.
Yeah, of course.
That threw me off. No. There's just the characterization's weird. The whole he's wearing a gun, and then Mel, the sister of Lila, is like, oh my God, he's wearing a gun. How dare you? You're a car. I think she calls him like a coal roller or something like that. So all right, we're supposed to hate. We want Mel to die, but then the rest of Mel's actions, she's not a woke social justice warrior. The rest of her actions, they directly contradict the way she's introduced, and she's just a middle of the road, like sympathetic female. And so again, any opportunity they have to build some type of connection, at least hatred of these characters, likability or hatred, they just abandon.
Did you feel like Christian? It was? I do. Did you feel like it was cathartic for the audience when Lila's sister was covered in sewage after she's under the house and Leatherface cuts through the pipe? Yeah,
it was odd to me because if they had built her up as this hateable, overly woke, smug, true influencer, the kind we all easily hate, we would have been like, that's cathartic. Instead it was just like, well, oh, that's weird. Okay, she's got feces on her. What is that, feces or is it grapes? I don't know what's going on.
Well, speaking of influencers, Eugene's back in the chat and saying Eugene does advocate shooting pranksters in the gut, specifically the one in there. He does follow up with a bark. Eugene, don't be a bad dog. You shouldn't shoot anyone in the gut. If you need to shoot someone in the ankle, we could talk about it. Dominicus Saxon says Eugene isn't from Idaho, which is where he lives. So that's fine. But also there were earlier comments in the chat that I want to make sure we get to. Rochi, we're getting all the big celebrities here with an FKB. I'm sorry I don't have a By Brendan drop. And earlier Eugene also gave us a bark. Everybody knows that Eugene's a good boy. Kiki Loco wants me to send Eugene the link. I think that might take away from what Carlos and I are trying to do. I'll tell you what, Eugene, next time. All right. The next time Carlos and I do a show, we'll carve out the last 5 minutes and we'll let Eugene pop in. But
My
I will
head is
not give you
exploding.
screen sharing capabilities. I've learned
Right.
from all of our idol that your guests should not be able to share their screen if you don't know who they are. So, uh, but we're talking about influencers, and I want to get back for our visual audience. You saw this when we showed the trailer. This There's a lot of bad in this movie, and I think that this is an attempt at satire. But when Leatherface, basically all the hipsters and influencers and I don't know, investors and everything, all the crypto bros, I don't know what they were, they all get cornered in this bus, and so then Leatherface finds them in the bus, and he's like, "Well, I got a chainsaw, and they can't go anywhere." So he starts tearing into all these kids. But of course, the first thing they do is they get out their cell phones, and you can see that they're live streaming. And one of them even says, "You're going to get canceled, bro." And I'm
Ugh.
like, they can't be taking that seriously. Like that has to be an attempt at a joke. That can't be actual social commentary. Do you think they were trying to be funny, or do you think it accidentally happened?
Oh, I mean, Jesus. I don't know which hack to insult in this universe, but there is okay. There, I get it. Leatherface comes on, and these kids are so trained, and they just start taking pictures. But okay, that's a joke right there. It's mildly amusing, and then he hacks them up with a chainsaw. But to go that extra step to beat us over the head again, it's AI. It's AI
Yeah.
generated to beat us over the head with that punchline, the giant wink saying, "You're going to get canceled, bro." Just that
Yeah.
perfectly summarizes why this movie is a trash heap.
I could see filming that line, like,
Okay.
oh, some of you guys try a little line, but then when you're assembling the movie, you're like, no, 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 that doesn't work. We're just going to go ahead and take that out,
Right.
But
And again, like
they were
these are
married to the concept.
and
Go
and,
ahead.
and and according to the logic of the film, if you like take it literally, these are investors. These are all people looking to invest in real estate property.
Yeah.
But they're all that also this is a world in this movie where like a banker, the person who's arranging the financing is like 23 years old. So
That's true.
are these influences? Are these it doesn't no, they're just boring investors. Like
Yeah. I do
kill me
like
some Jake
the iron.
Paul.
Yeah, I do like the irony, the realization. I think that there's the one nice touch when what's Lila's sister's name? I've already forgotten
Mel.
some of these. Mel. Yeah. So Mel actually finds the deed to the house that Leatherface and his mom are living in, and it's like, oh
Why?
yeah, you didn't actually own their house. You killed that lady,
Right. And
through shock, and basically everything. So when she's like, no, the bank took care of everything, she was right. Just imagine how preventable this all was, Mel.
it's so stupid. Like Dante, Mr. Chef, right? He's the guy that's supposed to take he's keeping track of all the deeds and right. These are millennials, right? These are influencers allegedly. And
Yeah,
and what does Dante have all the deeds in? A recipe box like my mother
yeah.
had in
Oh,
1978. He doesn't have this
yeah. No,
digitally anywhere.
it's the accordion file that I have all my kids' medical records in, so that they can go to like school and summer camp and stuff. It's like the
Right.
stuff
Like
that you're like, I only need this stuff once every 2 years. Let me
and
go ahead and dust it off.
And the old lady, right? She's lived with Leatherface. She ran an orphanage, by the way. This is really picking on the movie, but orphanages stopped being a thing by like 1960. I mean, once the government started paying for foster care, we didn't have
Yeah,
any orphanages. But anyway, the former orphanage owner lady who's taking care of Leatherface, a mass spree killer, kills people with a
yeah,
chainsaw and mallet. She was able to do that for 50 years, but someone starts asking her about the title, the deed to her house, and she just throws up and immediately drops
yeah.
dead. Also
Immediately
struck
drops
me
dead.
as
By the way, shout out to the actress who played that character's name is Ginny. That's Alice Krieg, who people might know from a number of things, but nerds like me know her as the Borg Queen from Star Trek First Contact. So
oh,
and she's actually
I,
passed away, I believe, in the last couple years.
I was
So
gonna
like
say
the
that
last year or so. Sorry, what were you saying, Carlos?
aren't Borgs hot? Now I'm confused sexually. The lady that
There's
died.
one. No, no. There's only one. There's only one that's
Oh,
hot, and
okay.
that's Jerry Ryan. Maybe she hasn't passed away. Maybe I'm mistaken. You know what? It was it was the actress who played the Borg Queen on the Picard show. Alice Krieg, alive and well. Good for you. Uh, Fake news saying that she had died, but it was the actress who did on TV. No, there's literally only one hot Borg. It's the one in the tight fitting spandex, and her name's Jerry Ryan.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. This is what I get for mentioning Star Trek in front of grown-ups. I should know better. When I do those shows. When there's praise in the chat, I will stop any conversation. See, this is why it's good that I don't accept super chats because I just put up stuff for free. If you say something nice,
wait, I'm not getting paid.
So no, you'll be paid. You'll be paid in land in Harlow, Texas. There's an abandoned movie theater with some creaky floorboards that I'm going to send to you. TL Stock says 2 of my favorite guys here, being a fan of Dennis Miller, Stuttering John, Shuley and the Gang, and horror films. I'm in heaven right now. Well, if you like horror films and Dennis Miller, I'm sure you've seen his classic Bordello of Blood, which was a Tales from the Crypt movie about vampire hookers. TL, I saw that movie in the theater a full decade before I ever even worked for him. So I chose to go see that movie. I didn't see it out of some obligation to my boss. And
like my
a listener to the old radio show sent me the CD soundtrack for Bordello of Blood, and I treasure it always. And I'm sorry I spoke over you, Carlos.
No, that was my fault. I was just saying my co-host Brian Spears loves that movie. It's one of his favorites.
I mean, it you have to watch it through a very specific lens, which
Stoned.
is that. Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, that helps. But it's also, it doesn't take itself seriously. Corey Feldman is like the second lead in the movie. So that kind of tells you everything. And, Dennis would tell great stories about how, Corey Feldman wanted to rehearse and choreograph the fights. And he's like, and the way he always summarized it is, I'm here because a minor Baldwin brother fell out in the last minute. And I kept saying no. And they raised their offer. And eventually the number got so big, I'm like, yeah, I'll do your Tales from the Crypt movie. So, which, look, that's one of the things that I enjoyed about working with Dennis is the very painful honesty at times. And in any case, the painful honesty about this movie, getting back on focus, back on track, is it's not very good. A bad slasher movie will still have some good kills. And when I announced on Twitter that we were going to talk about this, somebody mentioned that they liked the bus scene. There's one kill that I think I like specifically. There's the one girl who is climbing out the window and she almost makes it out the window and Leatherface just cuts her in half. I'm like, all right, I like that. I like that moment. Oh my God, I'm free. Oh no, I'm cut in half and I'm dead. But there aren't really, that's the one I can think of. Did you feel that even, any of the specific kills in this movie, you're like, all right, that's a good one. That's a notch in Leatherface's belt. Well, he probably wears like a rope belt, but you know what I mean?
I thought the kills were like the one saving grace of the movie. I thought the kills were okay. The first one, they're taking Leatherface's adopted mother to the hospital, but she passes away in this ambulance van thing, right? So Leatherface loses it. And he breaks a police officer's arm and then stabs him in the throat with the man's compound fracture. I thought that was pretty effective. He kills the other police officer eventually, and then he kills this first influencer who we know nothing about, who's just there to die.
The one guy was apparently engaged to her.
Dante,
Dante.
Right, yeah. But
which, by the way, that's also one of the biggest tropes of all these kinds of movies. Why exactly is she in that ambulance where she ends up getting massacred? It's like,
I'll ride.
I hope that lady's going to be okay, but we'll find out, later. We don't need to go ride in the ambulance,
right? And the script is further. It's further weakened by the fact you have the two main characters who are sisters. Neither has a love interest, so we have Dante and his blonde girlfriend just there to die because we've already told us, okay, they're not love interests of either the main characters. They're just going to die eventually. The blonde dies, right? Leatherface cuts open her stomach essentially, but that's when you get, as sort of a hardcore, I guess. Well, I'm not a hardcore horror fan, but I think back to the to part 2, and I think back to Last House on the Left. in this day and age, we're fully expecting Leatherface to reach into her gut and pull out her entrails, right? That's
Yes, of
disgusting.
course. Yeah.
That doesn't happen. This is a neutered horror movie as well. It pulls its punches because this is very mainstream.
Yeah.
So he does the easy cut, but there's no real gore to it. It's presented as nicely as a murder can. And I think that's on purpose. So I thought the hammer kill there, somebody gets the guy Richter, again, spoiler alert. I actually found myself stopping and watching to see where the CGI was. I thought that was sort of an effective kill. Totally.
In what? Well, in analyzing it, did you feel like they at least did a decent enough job with the CGI, or was the freeze frame? Basically, you can see where like the it disappears.
I couldn't tell where CGI blood was, and I've read that this movie prides itself on doing a lot of practical effects. So
Okay.
I thought that the way I have no idea, but no, it didn't look computerized, cartoony to me, and I was impressed by that. But it's immediately negated by the fact, well, what happened right before that? There's a thing with keys. For some reason, Richter holds on to keys. He finds Dante with his face cut open, and that was a pretty good looking injury.
Yeah, that reveal that he'd been cut like along his lower jaw, because we didn't see his face, we just saw him kind of walking around. That was actually a decent reveal. I agree with that. Yeah.
But instead of saying, take the key, here, I had the keys, Dante doesn't give them to the bus driver and go, get out of here. He holds on to them just so we can get the scene where Mel is reaching into his dead hand to get his keys. But I mean, back to like the kills, I thought they were okay. I would give those like a 6 out of 10 if I was to grade them.
Yeah, I think the movie itself wouldn't rate anywhere near that high.
No.
But the kills at least looked convincing. There was some degree of inventiveness. I don't know. I mean, it didn't feel like exactly stuff we'd seen before. I mean,
and the bus, okay, they full on did Texas Chainsaw Massacring. He just goes to town endlessly. But the problem is he's going to town on what do they call those things in video games? The non-player characters.
NPCs, yeah.
They're all NPCs.
Yeah,
so
they're exactly. They're all NPCs with cell phones. Mel and Lila trying to get through the roof of the bathroom of the bus. That was a decent enough sequence. But there's 2 moments that we just have to assume. One, that, okay, I guess they get out the roof and then they jump down or something, because all we know is now they're on the ground. And then there's also, when I alluded to Mel getting just coated in sewage under the house, she was up against a grate out of a window, and Lila was on the other side. And then she's pulling her out as she's covered. And I'm like, all right, I guess maybe they felt like we don't need the scene where she like pulls it out, pulls off the grating. And I'm like, I don't know. I just wanted the little hint of logic for how they got out of those situations.
That's a great point. I totally missed that. I did. She's covered in feces, raw sewage, and I was taken aback by look, I'm the youngest of 4. I have 4 older brothers, right?
Sure.
And I get you want to hug your loved ones, but she's covered in human feces, and the script just forgets that, and she's hugging her and digging her fingers through the back of her hair. It's like, that's just
that's just
dumb and gross.
Yeah, exactly.
But the script totally forgets that she was covered in feces, because there's
let's move on from that. In terms of the screenwriting. I guess the mom is probably the most likable character in the movie, because just a bunch of bad shit happens and she didn't do anything wrong. She was just living her life. And what was the name of the guy with the gun at the gas station who ends up working in the body shop? You said his name before.
Richter. That's Richter. Yeah.
He's, as it turns out, he's a fairly likable, noble character to some extent. There's that weird exchange though, where like, Lila's just talking to him and he asks if she wants to fire the gun. That obviously setting something up later. But and then like Mel's like, did you fuck him? I'm like, wait, what? She was like with him for like 4 minutes.
Yeah, and not only that, she looks about 12 and he looked 40. Yeah. That was all. That was so. No, nobody was thinking that, Mel. What's wrong with you? This movie has no sex. Stop it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there couldn't be less sex in this movie. And,
right, everybody's non-binary essentially. The whole movie is. The script is.
And go ahead.
One thing I wanted to point out real quick, Christian. And I think this is really the fundamental flaw of the movie, although I've given it 19 fundamental flaws. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre It was about a family of killers,
Yeah.
right? You mentioned the grandfather. You were surprised he was still alive in part one. There's the hitchhiker character. Part two, I'd argue the best performance is Bill Moseley as Chop Top. There is
Yes.
none of that here. There's no House of Horrors. It's just Leatherface is, yeah, he's iconic and he's the main guy, but he is always supported by these very colorful other characters. You know, it's what House of a Thousand Corpses ripped off. And this movie completely abandons that and just makes Leatherface the guy, which I think makes it boring. It's boring characters across the board. My other problem is you see the orphanage. We're introduced to the orphanage.
Yeah.
Deliberately, we see it's been there since 1920. Right. And so, okay, they're going to enter this house of horror. Oh no, it's just a little old lady's house. Like, there's nothing scary in that house unless like hair curlers and the whole thing. Like Leatherface put his chainsaw in a wall for 50 years. Like what?
Yeah. Well,
I don't know.
yeah, no, the logic of it, I agree with you 100%. In terms of, fan service of the reveal, I'm like, all right, I get it. But yeah, why was it in there for all that time,
And they do. There's nothing subtle about this movie because they give you they frame it so you can read the make and model number of the saw. So okay, you can Google that and be like, oh yeah, it's the original. Good job,
like,
job, guys.
The
Just
props
hits you over the
department
head.
did their job.
Right.
Good job set dressing.
Yeah, good. You know how to use Google. Good.
Yeah, exactly. And, look, it wouldn't be this kind of a movie if it didn't have the false ending. And for our audience on YouTube or wherever you might be watching it on social media, I'm not going to go all the way into it because I'm like, I don't even know. I mean, look, I'm playing it off YouTube, so clearly this video can exist there. But Mel and Lila, they're in their autopilot electric car, their self-driving car, which I guess really factors in. And then, oh my gosh, Leatherface just drags her right out of the car. And then, Lila is looking and boy, I grabbed that at the exact right second.
Good
I think
job.
a half second more. And but it's almost comical because no spoiler alert, her head comes off and then he's dancing in the street holding it while Lila's self-driving car just pulls away
at 5 miles an hour.
Yeah, and that is the end of the movie. I mean, there's the scene in the credits that we talked about, but it's just like I don't know. I think it's fine. I didn't need them. Look, I didn't need to feel like these two sisters lived happily ever after. I think Lila, I guess, earned another free pass at life because she was in that school shooting, maybe, so it's like, all right, I guess, her final destination. That was a point that Lila makes up at one point. She's like, I did this. I brought all this death around us because I got away from that one. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting, but let's never talk about it again because we don't want to make this movie interesting.
Yeah, I liked the ending. I mean, just for the pure visceral shock of it, and it's like, okay, I hated that character, and she got beheaded. Good, but it's too little, too late. I mean, there's no sense when you watch Texas Chainsaw 1, especially. It's creepy and it's unpredictable. You don't know. It's not a movie that makes you feel safe or comfortable in any way.
Yeah.
And this one is completely safe and comfortable, and there's no surprise over who lives and who dies, except this one part at the very end, which is, I don't know if it earned that. I don't know if it had the right to do that to the audience up to that point. But I guess in terms of everything contradicting itself, characters contradicting themselves, I guess it makes sense because nothing in the movie does make sense.
Nothing in the movie makes sense, and I'm showcasing the wide shot of Leatherface just standing with Mel's head in his hand. You can't really see it, so I figured, what the heck, I'll put it up there.
Leatherface kind of looks like me, even with the mask on. He's got a fat, bulbous face, probably drank too much, and he's not exactly in shape, but he does kung fu pretty good.
That's a great point. He does have some good. Yeah, he's trained in Krav Maga or something. I mean, there's a lot of time to fill when your chainsaw is walled up in the middle of your house. But I think that the look of Leatherface is okay in this one. There is something about sort of the lo-fi low quality mask in the original. I think, it's almost like it got a little cartoony, almost Toxic Avenger-y looking in some of the sequels, where it was just like, oh, you could sell that mask. Is that a decision?
I
Sometimes.
have one right behind me. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. But that first one you can't, because it looks like it's made of faces,
It
so
looks like, it's rotting off. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
The other thing, I don't think we didn't touch upon it. It has the whole, I don't know if this was, if like the script for the new Halloween films had already been in existence, but this blatantly copies bringing, what's her name, Jenny, back from the first film. I don't know if that was her name, the old lady from the first film. That's a complete ripoff of the latest Halloween films that came out, where Jamie Lee
Right.
Curtis comes back.
Sally's her name.
Sally,
Yes.
sorry,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. The
completely
first,
does nothing.
sorry,
You could have cut that out of the movie. Does nothing for the film, and
it does nothing for the
it's
film
comical.
because all she does is like finally get killed 50 years later, which
Right?
it's fine. And it's like she tosses a gun to Lila or whatever, the shotgun. And yeah,
After
I think that the first, and look, they did 3 of those Halloween movies, the recent trilogy, and the first one was at least watchable but not great. The middle one
Agreed.
is hands down one of the worst movies I've ever seen, because like Jamie Lee Curtis spends like half the movie in a hospital, in bed, and not interacting with Michael Myers. And it's one of those things that a lot of times when movies are filmed concurrently, sometimes neither of them turn out very good, like the Matrix sequels. Other times you're like, oh yeah, they were just saving everything for the last one, and but that idea had definitely been out there, and I think it worked in that first of the Halloween reboots, where she finally,
at least as a fan, there's
yeah,
a potential for it to be good. I don't know if anybody was thinking, wow, I sure hope Sally gets another crack at Leatherface. That really didn't
Right.
exist.
Right, exactly. Yeah, also, I don't know, just my hunch, if that had happened to me, Texas is the last place in the world I would continue to live. But, that's just me. I guess she either told that story to anybody who would listen or never talked about it again, depending on who you believe. And I choose to believe John Larroquette, by the way. So he's never lied to me before.
She went into literal public service. Like she was so traumatized. She had to be isolated. I'll get a job in the public sector.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's this wasn't well received. I don't know if Netflix planned. I think at that one point it had a working title of like New Beginnings or something. I can't quite remember. I'd read something about it, but
something like that. I'm sure
they were trying to do a franchise from it, but then I think it's back to the old drawing board with this one, but
although they'll come out with another one in another 2 years, and of course it'll be Lila is now Leatherface. She's running around, the traumatized victim of the school shooting and survivor of this, and she becomes Leatherface. She's only 5'1" and weighs 90 pounds, but
you say that, but whatever the next one is will not be as interesting of a story as that. They'll conveniently forget this one. You know how, like, speaking of Halloween, how there's so many different chronologies of whether you believe this movie or that movie, and that trilogy was like, no, just the first one, and you ignore everything else. Yeah. So maybe that's what they do here. I want to catch up on some stuff from the chat. Brian Spears, your co-host, mentioned that he couldn't name the movie yet, but he did do some low-budget horror film during the pandemic, awaiting release in Greenwood Lake, New York.
Oh, I mean,
I was back in Greenwood Lake last year. I hadn't been there in years. And you have to understand, it really is sort of like, small town. There was like no chain restaurants, no chain anything growing up. It was like, we had like one supermarket and somehow like 4 video stores. And I go back and there's like a Dunkin' Donuts in the middle of town. I'm like, what the fuck? Where was this when I was a kid, But it'll be interesting to see. Derek Jeter had a house there at one point that he sold for. I don't know how much time he ever spent there, but he had a very nice establishment. Yeah. Dominicus Saxon earlier said, in horror movies, not resorting to a gore fest is critical. When it came out, Blair Witch scared the frick, which is Idahoan for fuck, out of everyone, no matter what they say now. Yeah, I think that and that was why we focused on Blair Witch Project on Yo Remember the 90s, is because you have to look at it in the context of when it came out. I couldn't imagine, and we all said this, OJ, Cardiff, and we all said, I can't imagine watching Blair Witch Project ever again in my life. Maybe like, oh, I want to see a scene that I remember because it's interesting the way that I remember it being filmed. But that was like the first, like, internet backstory of like, here's the website, here's these fake news reports, here's all this stuff. Could this be real? I don't know if it's real. Hey, if that's real, why the fuck are these three turning up at the MTV Awards? But up until that point, and just they did a great job with that. And just, and otherwise, movie that's kind of like, but there were legitimate jump scares in that movie. And that's what I was saying at the beginning of our conversation. People were legitimately scared. And I could see that being the case for the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This movie had a limited theatrical run, like most things on Netflix, because they want to qualify for awards. You might be surprised, Carlos, but this did not win awards of any kind. I should check the Razzies from last year. Actually,
I'll give it Dabbler of the Week my next episode.
Right, exactly.
Over Hack Ride.
Oh, well, Hack Ride is also America's favorite demon. We talked about America's favorite puppet, America's favorite potato, and all of those things. Here comes your buddy. It's AI Ray.
AI Ray.
People think I'm a serial killing strangler driving around back roads from gig to gig. I just tell them it's part of my, quote, dark comedy act. Well, the pink blanket would throw people off of the trail. And Kinky Loco does respect my decision to not send the link to Eugene. And I'm not sure how to say this name, but it's just O.
That is O umlaut.
Yeah, O umlaut. The bus scene is the only watchable part of that shit show of a movie. You don't need to insult my guest. I don't think that's necessary.
I'm not Carlos. I'm Eugene.
Yeah. Well, sorry. Eugene's a good boy. The kills are great, but they have no heart. Emptiness, Brian says. Do you feel that was the case? I'd love to start a really bitter divide between you and your co-host over a terrible movie.
We've known each other since preschool. We hate each other immensely. But I would say, I don't know. Look, they're all right. I don't know. How does a kill have heart? I'm not exactly sure. Well, I guess he's saying it's more AI generated. Look, the way to watch this movie is to go to YouTube and just search Netflix Chainsaw Massacre kills. That's the way to watch this movie, and just watch a few of the kills.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess it's like we were saying, when he goes into, or like I said, when he goes into the bus, it's just he's killing NPCs. There's no.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Lost. You're not invested in it. I mean,
right.
The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Sally's brother is this kid in a wheelchair who has no chance. I mean, literally has no chance. There's not too many of those in horror movies where it's like, can we get the disabled and the handy capable, go face to face with a serial killer? Let's see what they're able to do. Talking about not having Leatherface's family earlier, Dominicus Saxon pointed out Leatherface alone is as bad as Jake without Elwood.
That's
brilliant. Or it's as bad as Blues Brothers 2000. What do you think about that?
I don't know if I'd say that. Blues Brothers 2000.
We've got to draw the line somewhere. And TL Stock, the Nightmare on Elm Street final jump scare door window scene is still effective to this day, in my opinion. I agree with that. Talking about Nightmare on Elm Street, when Carlos and I were trading messages, I remember that I liked the Nightmare on Elm Street reboot with Jackie Earle Haley that was poorly received, and they didn't make any more. They haven't even made any with Robert Englund or anything since then. I don't know. I mean, do you have movies like that? We're specifically talking about this genre where you're like, I don't know. I didn't think it was that bad. I like Jackie Earle Haley. I mean, it was a good moment in time to use him, like, well, what if Kelly Leak, killed the Bad News Bears? Let's watch that.
Yeah. I thought that casting was going to go well. I remember nothing about that particular movie. Yeah. I mean, I guess, I don't know. I'm not a comic book guy, so I don't know the whole history lore of all that stuff. But I like Watchmen, which it seems to be. I'm not supposed to.
You're talking about the TV show or the Zack Snyder movie? Or
no, that TV show was too smart for its own good. I couldn't. I had to set my TV on fire. No, the Zack Snyder movie I thought was entertaining.
I found it entertaining, the Zack Snyder one. I saw that in the theater, and I mean, it's like I see all the superhero movies, so I'm not like, oh, it's not my favorite, but I'm like, you know what it is it's different. You know, this is before he made his Superman movie. You know, before Superman fought Batman for 8 minutes in a movie. You know, so
Yeah, that's a
yeah, no, I think Zack Snyder, when you let him have his vision, he can tell some really interesting stories. And I think he'll be better suited, not playing in the DC comic book sandbox in the future. Dominicus Saxon, I thought the Nightmare reboot was well done, but mostly due to Haley's impressive acting ability. I think he's good as Freddy, and they kind of tell but it's tough. It is one of those things that Robert Englund is so identifiable with that role. But also, look, the movie wasn't great. I just remember liking it and thinking like, oh, I guess they'll make more of these. But Kinky Loco, is this true that you hate Day of the Dead even though it's great?
absolutely true. I think I don't know how people there's this retroactive love for it. I think it has potential to be a great movie, but I can't get past the Jamaican accents, the ham acting. I've seen better acting in like Jenna Jameson porn from 1991. It's so wooden. I love Dawn of the Dead. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. Whenever George Romero would appear at a horror convention, I would go see him in the tri-state area. But
Nice.
Day of the Dead is boring. I mean, when it finally gets going, it's great, but wow, it takes a year to get there.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Unless you're high, Kinky
Right.
Loco.
Well, yeah, that's a different story entirely. Yeah, in general, zombies are just sort of my least favorite adversary. It's probably the thing that makes them the most compelling. But
Oh,
for
I love them.
storytelling, I just, I'm just like, oh yeah, look, there's more of them. Oh, what are they going to do? Try and eat your brains? Oh my gosh, I hope you're going to get away. So I think in the right dose, I can enjoy it. But I can't imagine watching even 4 seasons of Walking Dead, let alone like 7 or 8. So to
Yeah,
to
that show. I love zombies, but yeah, Walking Dead should have stopped after maybe 3. But I think that if you want to watch Day of the Dead, go Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the
yeah,
Dead, and then just watch 28 Days Later and let that stand
28
in for
Days
a bit.
Later,
Good movie.
that's the Danny Boyle movie. I really like
Yes.
that. I thought that
Yeah.
was great. And the original Night of the Living Dead is, like the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You're watching it through again in that bubble of like, okay, people had never seen anything quite like this before, and just you've seen a lot of things like it. Some of them made the same. Eugene, I think you're being a bad boy in the chat. There's a bark bark. I am not a fat Mexican bark bark. I don't know what that's.
Hey,
I'm gonna play I don't even know what that means, Eugene.
mods,
Okay.
ban him.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to ban anybody. I've got 11 people in the chat.
God
What am I
bless
going to
him.
do? No, Eugene's a good boy, but
Such a good boy.
maybe somebody has to take Eugene out for a walk. Well, Carlos, I'm glad we had this. I'm glad we had this time together, as Carol Burnett would say, and I'm glad that I had an excuse to watch this movie. I'm sorry, this is really important. Dominicus Saxon wants it to be known he is a fat Mexican. All these years that Dominicus Saxon has been watching and listening to my stuff, I have no idea what he looks like, except for the fact that that's how he has identified himself. But I'm glad that, and I thought that this was a great choice for Halloween, because yeah, we could talk about the filmmaking of any of like the real Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, even the reboot, the Michael Bay reboot, but talking about this one, I think was probably the most fun. And Eugene agrees. So Eugene, you're back on the good boy list. This was a good stream. I'm glad we started at 9 a.m. Pacific, because I knew that there was no way we'd be competing with John Melendez. Because you've noticed, I don't know how closely you follow John's streams, but they've moved to the middle of the day Pacific time.
Oh, have they?
Yeah. Well, we're trying, and I'll announce it here. We're trying a new time for Who Are These Broadcasters next Tuesday. We're going to do it at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, so that we're not up against John and MLC and Shuli. We were up against like 4 shows this week, and I think we did pretty good. I think we do a good show. Myself and Eric Zane.
We're up against Ray DeVito right now, I believe. If everyone can go in his chat and steal them for the end of this broadcast, he's got thousands.
Well, we have AI Ray, so why should anybody actually be watching real Ray when we have that?
We have his brain overlord.
Yeah, and TL enjoyed this. Dominicus Saxon said, fun chat. And then talking about John, he just asked the important question. Who? And I think that's a good question. So if people want to see more of you, I know you mentioned at the beginning of the show, but let everybody know where they can find you and what you're up to.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's Insufferable Bastards. It's on YouTube. We do one episode a week. I think we usually do Friday or Saturday, sometimes Sunday. I don't know. I have a wacky schedule, but I am scheduled to interview that guy Carl from WATP tomorrow morning. I'm going to record that. Going to ask him.
Let me ask this question. Who? Carl from WATP?
A fellow upstate New Yorker guy. So yeah, we'll probably release that. I think we're going to record it and then release it live and like roast our own. I'll roast myself. I'll be calling myself fat in the chat. Do something like that. So look for that. I don't know, Saturday or Sunday.
Well, if before you talk to him, you should catch a snippet of the most recent Who Are These podcasts where Husey came in armed with clips from a Bruce Springsteen podcast hosted by Scott Ackerman and Adam Scott. And in addition to talking about Bruce Springsteen, they do a lot of improv comedy to fill out the hour. Husey showed up with clips that were like 4 minutes long, and there were no jokes. Carl's like, what are you trying to do to me? Anyway, so that'd be a good starting point, but that's great. Yeah, Carl was once a guest on this show back in January. It was actually our 10th anniversary episode. I asked him to go through our first episode from January of 2013 and pull some clips. And I pulled some clips as well. And he, at some point in the middle, he's like, I don't usually do this to somebody's face. I'm being a lot nicer than I would be if you weren't here. And I'm like, wow, well, I'm really glad I'm here, because he wasn't being very nice.
He was a dick.
Yeah, but that's what I wanted. That's why I did it. And that's why, that's why.
Awesome.
That's why we love Carl. It was a lot of fun. So yeah, well, that'll be great. And do you want people following you on social media, or do you want them to have to look for you? Okay. So
patreon.com/RayDeVito.
Well, I think a great place to end would be that Eugene points out that Ray DeVito is a bad dog. But I consider myself to be a good dog. You can, of course, find the Bladtcast here on our YouTube channel, BLADTCAST. The audio version of this will be up after the weekend. Plenty of time for your holiday enjoyment. BLADTCAST. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. And as I mentioned, Who Are These Broadcasters? Tuesdays on the Who Are These Podcasts Network. We're going to give it a try, 2 p.m. Eastern, our next episode. But, early afternoon on the East Coast. That's the key that you really need to understand there. And if you're a big nerd like me, I do shows for a network called Geekscape. And you'll see us wrapping up episode 3 of Loki on Disney Plus. So you can check out all that stuff. But again, at Christian DMZ, you'll find everything you need to know. Thanks again to everyone in the chat, including Eugene, who's a good boy. Dominicus Saxon's a good boy. I don't want to say, basically everybody was a good boy, except for Flat Cat Jessica, who's a good girl. But anyway, that is all the time we have for now. Thanks again to everyone, especially to Carlos, for taking the time. And we will see you next time on the Bladtcast.